All right, hi everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Tyler Hespeler. I'm a local real estate agent in Mystic, Connecticut, and the purpose of this video is to provide an update on the current housing market, both on a nationwide and a local level. Now, what I have here is research I've collected through hours of looking through different data and different research, and I've attached all the articles I've read through the links below, so feel free to check them out. And now, while I can provide an accurate idea of how the current market is performing, it's really hard to make an accurate prediction as there's just too many variables at this time to make an accurate prediction, right? Everything from, potential mortgage forbearance paybacks, changing economics, changing demographics, workforce trends. There's really a lot going on right now, and it's really hard to make a prediction. But what we can do is we can take, what we've learned through past historical situations and use current trends to maybe take an educated guess. But the main purpose of this video is to provide you with an updated report for the nationwide and local market. So let's dive right in. So the first thing we'll take a look at here is an article. This is Keeping Current Matters, right? So we'll take a look here. This article was published in mid-May of this year, so it's a recent article. And the first thing they're going to talk about is the months of supply of inventory, right? So they're going to talk about having 4.1 months of supply of inventory. Now, what that means is, so you take, if everything stopped, if they stopped taking in new inventory right now, it would take about 4.1 months to sell off everything that's currently on the market, right? Now, typically and historically speaking, anything less than 6 months is a seller's market, and anything more than 6 months is a buyer's market. Now, what that means is if you have less than 6 months of inventory, typically, the less months there are of inventory, the less product there is, right? And that goes for every different type of product, whether it's housing, boats, cars, planes, whatever that product is. Whenever there's less of it, you're going to have, less months of supply, right? So whenever you have less of something, people tend to pay more for it, which is why you call these types of situations seller's markets, right? So you have very few inventory and you have multiple buyers competing with other buyers to buy the product. That tends to drive prices up a little bit. Now, looking at that from the other side, anything more than 6 months in that buyer's market is if you have a flood of product, if you have a lot of houses on the market and you have more houses than you have buyers, you're going to have a buyer's market, right? Because at that point, you're going to have sellers who are competing with other sellers to sell their house, right? To win the buyer. And what happens in that case is typically prices tend to go down because you have sellers competing. So right now we're looking at, kind of a seller's market, and it's been that way. If you look at this chart here for the past probably 10 years, you look at, back in 2011, late 2010, about, right around that six month range, right? Now, interesting point about this article. This is, again, Keeping Current Matters. So they make a quote right here. It says, as buyers return to the market as the country rebounds from the pandemic, a limited inventory of homes for sale could fuel bidding wars and push prices higher. Now, very likely could happen. Playing devil's advocate a little bit here, what we might see is you have and we'll get into this a little bit further, but we have had a drop in new listings recently, right? Due to, current events, the whole pandemic, there's been a lot of uncertainty and there's been a drop in new listings, right? So what this article is kind of saying is we're going to kind of keep that drought and we're going to have, more of a seller's market as the year goes on. I tend to think, we do have a little bit of a void right now. What could happen in the fall is you have all these spring sellers who wanted to sell their house, but then, kind of are hesitant right now. So if they go into the fall and they join the rest of a typical fall market, if we have a normal fall market, we might see, a pretty big surge in the fall. And, given that whole buyer seller market idea, if we do have that explosive inventory in the fall, it might lead to more of a buyer's market. It might bring prices down a little bit. But again, like I said before, it's all speculation and, only time will tell what's going to happen. This article tends to think that, we're going to kind of see that seller's market remain steady for the rest of the year. But we'll see what happens. In this chart here, they're looking at, appreciation. All these different companies, they're expecting appreciation to remain pretty steady for the next couple of years, right? Going to 2%. So they are expecting appreciation, at least numbers to be in the positive for the next couple of years, right? And we'll go to this next article. This is according to the National Association of Realtors, and this website, very accurate data, but they tend to come out with every month on the 21st and 22nd of each month. They come out with data for the last month, so it does take a little while for the NAR research to get in, but it is very accurate research. So what we have here is numbers for April, and we'll take a look. First thing I see is overall sales decreased year over year, down 17.2% from a year ago, right? So not the numbers you want to see, especially in being in the real estate business, but giving all things considered, you expect to see a drop. There's a lot of hesitancy. There's a lot of uncertainty, and these things happen, right? Now, the good news is we do see a recovery happening, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes, but we'll get through this article real quick. And again, so right here they mentioned, so right after that drop in sales, they mentioned the average median existing home price has gone up about 7.4% since April, or month to month. So April last year compared to April this year. We have a quote here. It's from Dr. Lawrence Yun, the chief economist from the National Association of Realtors. He states, record low mortgage rates are likely to remain in place for the rest of the year and will be a key factor driving housing demand as state economies steadily reopen. And this is consistent with everything I've read. Everything I've seen really talks about rates staying low, staying consistent, keeping low and not really coming up at all. The one argument I would have against that is, and I'm not saying this is right, if you look at, the current mortgage business right now, the mortgage industry, and, with mortgage forbearance payments, and I think at this point it's about 10% of mortgage owners have applied for mortgage forbearance. It's somewhere around there, right? And a lot of those people are going to have to pay 3 to 6 months worth of mortgage payments in a couple of months here. Now, it's not realistic. It's going to be very tough to do, especially with unemployment being so high. And the whole reason you apply for mortgage forbearance in the first place is because you can't afford that first payment, right? So what we could see happening is if you have these properties and these owners can't pay their forbearance fee, banks are going to have to make up for that loss somehow. And you might see rates go up just to make up for that loss. Who knows? Nobody knows what's going to happen. And again, he kind of mentions here, we're more listings and increased home construction will be needed to tame price growth. So in other words, kind of the same thing, buyer seller market. In order to tame that growth in price, to tame that increase in price, more properties have to be on the market, whether it's new construction or just new listings. Anytime you have more inventory, prices tend to go down a little bit. One thing that jumped out at me and kind of what I was expecting through the past couple of months is for the days on market to really jump, right? When you have uncertainty, and a lot of these contracts now, they have language and amendments that state, these contracts can be extended up to 30 days with, due to COVID-19. So one thing you would think would happen the days on the market for these properties would kind of go down a little bit. Or go up a little bit rather. But what we've seen is the opposite. We've actually seen, it says right here, seasonally from 29 days in March, 24 days in April, and 56% of homes sold in April are on the market for less than a month. I was expecting these houses to be on the market a little bit longer, right? So it seems like properties are being closed quicker. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. One thing we'll touch on right here, this is the same article, NAR. So distressed sales, right? Foreclosures and short sales represent 3% of sales in April. So 3%, you think about that. So anything distressed, a foreclosure or a short sale, which is when, the homeowner owes more on the house than it's actually worth. They buy the house, the value goes way down, and they can't sell the house at fair market value because they owe way more than that. Regardless, so distressed home sales only represent 3% of sales in April, right? Now, that's a good sign. And, a lot of people I've seen, articles and questions about, is this the next housing market crash? And when you look at what's happening now versus what happened in 2007, 2008, and leading up to that, right? The main driver of that housing market collapse was just subprime loans and banks being foolish and providing loans to people who just really shouldn't have gotten them and shouldn't have qualified for these loans, right? And, when people refinanced their house, they were doing loan to values of over 100%. So they were lending more than what that value of the house was, which is just insane. And you think about it right now, if I want to refinance my house right now, I'm only getting about 80% of that loan to value. So banks are quite a bit stricter right now than they were. Same thing, applying for a loan, credit scores have to be higher. There's stricter criteria and requirements right now to receive a loan, and they actually have tightened up a little bit recently. I know I read an article recently, JP Morgan had come out with a statement that they were raising their minimum credit score to 700, and they were raising their minimum deposit of 20%. So, banks are tightening up a little bit, and it's kind of a smart move just given the uncertainty and all these different decisions that banks have to make, right? So let's scroll down here a little bit. And so given that I think it was 17.2%, I stated earlier, was that the sales were down. And when you take that and you narrow it down to a single family home or a condo sale, those rates are down about 15.5% April this year compared to April last year, right? Same thing, and at the same time, the values have gone up about 7.3%, right? And we'll break this down a little bit more, and we'll go into the regional breakdown. So you look at the Northeast, right? We're going to have 18% decrease in number of sales from 1 year ago, and values have gone up about 8.7% from 1 year ago, right? So everything in this article is pretty consistent. Now we'll go to Realtor.com published an article, and they basically stated, and this was a little bit contradicting to other things I have read. I know that graph we had showed earlier showed about a 4% appreciation rate, kind of coming down to a 2% appreciation rate. And you look at the housing market predictions, COVID-19 update, this is published on May 13th. So home price value growth will flatten with a forecasted increase of 1.1%. So that's on the lower side compared to what I've seen. Buyers seeking affordability and space driving interest in the suburbs. That's something we've definitely seen, not just with the housing market, but just with the whole COVID-19 thing. People are working from home. People are finding out they can do this permanently, and they're looking to move to a house that can provide, more space in some place they want to be in, really 24/7, right? One thing that was consistent is, they're stating that the mortgage rates are going to remain low and may slide under 3% by the end of the year. And like I said, we already know rates are historically at their lowest right now. So as rates keep going lower and lower and lower, that's only going to benefit the buyer, right? Now, I'm sure everyone watching this video has heard probably 1,000 times that rates have never been lower. It's a great time to buy. What I want to do really quickly is just do a kind of an example on what exactly a low rate, the difference between one rate versus another rate can mean, on a monthly and a 30-year basis, right? So one quick way to do this, and I advise, anyone, if you're in the market to buy a house, or if you're in the market to even just begin to look for houses, go to amortizationcalculator.com and just do this, right? So go to mortgage. We're going to go the loan amount. Say we're going to buy a $250,000 house. And one quick note about this. So $250,000, that's not the entire purchase price, right? If you're going to put down $20,000 on a house that you're buying for $250,000, your loan's only going to be $230,000, right? So keep that in mind. Just for simplicity's sake, we'll keep this at $250,000. But yeah, so let's run the numbers, right? So mortgage, $250,000, 30 years, and let's do 3.5%, right? So calculate. And what we have is, we have a monthly payment of $1,122, right? Your total after 360 payments after 30 years is going to be $404,000. And $154,000 of that is interest alone, right? Which is, I know for myself, when I first bought my house, that was shocking to me. That's a very high amount of interest. You're paying, over half the properties in interest. And this is with a low interest rate. So, and I want to kind of briefly explain how an amortization schedule works. And, first of all, the best thing you can do is speak with a lender, speak with, a licensed or, a professional mortgage originator. Basically, how an amortization schedule works, right, is you have that interest payment isn't consistent, right? And it's a way for the banks to make their money really in the first couple of years, right? So if you look at this schedule, you can see your interest starts out wicked high and your principal's really low. So your monthly payment's the same, right? As long as you have a fixed interest rate, right, your monthly payment will be the same, but your interest is going to vary and your principal is going to vary. So when you start out, you're paying an insane amount of interest and your principal slowly comes up and your principal slowly goes down. And you can see, you're paying $1,100 and you're barely taking anything off of that balance because all of it's interest. Now, as we get to the later part of that loan, you have more principal, less interest, and then finally, you're now, once you finally pay the whole thing off, it's almost entirely principal. Okay, so let's check it out, right? So we just did a quick overview of what it would look like at a 3.5% rate for a $250,000 loan, and let's assume we have a 4.5% interest, which is still, considering history, a pretty low interest rate. But let's just examine what it would look like with just an additional 1% in that interest rate. So when at 4.5%, our new monthly payment goes up to $1,266, and we have the new total of all payments made, interest and principal, at $456, and the total interest paid after that is $206,000. So that's $206,000 on a mortgage of $250,000. Which is a lot, right? Now, so let's see what we're saving by that 3.5% interest rate, right? So we got $1,266 right here minus at $1,122. So we're saving an average of $144 a month, right? Roughly with that rate. Now, not a ton of money, but it's always good to have an extra $100 lying around, and let's multiply that. So per year, we're gonna have $1,700 to really take a look at this thing and see how much you'd be saving at the end of that entire 30-year mortgage. Just multiply that by 30, and that's 50 grand right there, right? So pretty significant over time. This number right here is assuming, this is only your mortgage. A lot of times banks will have escrow and they'll have your taxes and insurance wrapped into that. I don't want to get into that right now. That's a discussion you should have with your lender. And, whenever you go to buy a house, make sure you speak with your lender. You understand everything they're telling you, because the rates aren't everything. Having a low rate is great, but you also, want to keep in mind your deposit, your interest rates, and just make sure the math works for you, right? And, a lot of times I'll talk to people and they'll ask me, is now a good time to buy? And I get that question pretty frequently. And, what I'll say is, if you are in a comfortable position, you've saved up, you have money in a savings account, and you are confident that your job is going to stick around and you're an essential employee and you've had your job for a while, then yeah, rates are low. And if you find a house you love, it's a great time to buy. On the other side of that spectrum, if you really are kind of thinking about it and you don't have a ton of money saved up, maybe it's a good time just to kind of sit back and maybe build up your credit and build up that savings account and go from there, right? Because, one of the biggest factors in getting a great interest rate is your credit. So you could be better off right now just focusing on your credit score, building that up, and at the same time, putting money away and going from there. Now, obviously, everybody's different. Different things are going to work for different people. Your best bet is just to speak with your lender and make sure, he can tell you everything and explain it to you so you understand everything, and you just make sure you know what you're getting yourself into, right? So yeah, let's switch gears. I want to talk about the Connecticut real estate market really quickly. We'll go real quick right here. And one of the biggest things that we've seen recently, and this is making headlines everywhere, from the New York Post, the Connecticut Magazine, CNBC, and the Connecticut Insider. And there's headlines everywhere just kind of talking about how there's this big influx of people from New York City coming to Connecticut and just pretty much snatching up houses. It's not really a surprise. I don't think anybody really saw this coming, but it's also not a huge surprise when you think about it. I mean, you have this whole new change to the workforce potentially coming, where everyone's working from home. They're realizing right now that they actually can work from home, and they're probably going to want to have a house that they want to stay in 24/7. and that maybe has a yard, and if they only have to commute to work to New York once, twice, 0 times a week, why not spread out a little bit further? Maybe that rural suburban area becomes a little more attractive, and that's kind of the trend we're seeing right now. So we'll take a look really quickly at one of these articles. So this is from the Hartford Courant, and the headline right here is Connecticut becomes a top destination for people moving out of New York following the coronavirus outbreak. Okay, this is written May 25th, 2020. And this is, a lot of these articles are pretty consistent. They just talk about the same thing. People are moving from New York to other states and they're buying houses. Just a couple of statistics that we found in this article. So one that jumps out at me is between March 15th and April 28th of this year, this moving company, Flat Rate Moving, saw a 74% jump from people moving from New York to Connecticut as compared to those dates last year. Now we have this other statistic, at least 2,962 new mail forwarding addresses have been requested for people forwarding their mail from New York to Connecticut. And that doesn't necessarily mean buyers. That means people who are moving out of that area right now, either temporarily or permanently, just to get out of the city and to work from home. Being a landlord, I can attest to this. I've actually had a tenant from New York, originally was going to stay just 1 month, and here we are. It's going to be April, May, June, so all of June. We're going to be looking at a 3-month rental. And this is a pattern that we're seeing pretty frequently in a lot of other places. Now, it makes sense. People are fleeing the city and they just want to be able to have a place they can work from home. I think what we might see is kind of like a ripple effect. I think you're going to start out seeing a lot of people kind of consuming the Fairfield County, the western side of Connecticut. And then as those houses get snatched up, you might see that kind of widen. You might see this trend take place and work its way east along the whole shoreline of Connecticut, maybe Old Saybrook, Mystic. And we'll see how those numbers change. I mean, it's interesting. It's something that, like I said, didn't really see it coming, but it makes really total sense, right? All right, so we'll switch gears real quick and we'll pull up this chart. This is on showingtime.com, and ShowingTime is actually an app that real estate agents use. It's an app where you can request to see houses, right? So if I have a client who wants to see a house, I go to ShowingTime, put in a request, and they get notified. So they have their own section on their website. You go to showingtime.com, and they have their own section, Impact of COVID-19 on Real Estate Showings in North America. So we'll click on this, and there's a graph right here, and it's going to show early to mid-March, going into mid-April, we had this big drop in sales. And that's really when this big scare came out. People, businesses were shutting down. There's a lot more fear, a lot more uncertainty back then. And people just didn't want, especially if you had an occupied homeowner who lived in that house, they wouldn't want people to go in their house and see it, right? They don't know, where these people have been. And there was a lot of uncertainty, right? So a lot of these houses were just not being shown. And you can tell this drastic drop really took a couple of months to recover. But switch this to Connecticut, and pretty similar, right? We have the same drop right around mid to early March, big drop off, and now we're in the positive, right? And this blue line is compared to last year, and the orange line is this year, right? So kind of interesting. I think it's a great sign. I think, especially right now, you have all these regulations starting to relax. The governor came out with, the reopening plan June 1st, restaurants, and June 20th. We're going to really relax this even more, hopefully, depending on these results. Now we'll quickly just check. We'll kind of zoom in a little bit closer on the actual Connecticut and the New London County market. So this is a report. This is actually provided by Berkshire Hathaway. And this is a report right here that I can actually offer to you for free. If you're interested in learning about this local Connecticut, New London County, or even this town, I can, send you these market reports on a monthly basis. And it's great to be informed. But so we'll just briefly go through this. And if you saw my last video, you probably are familiar with how this report works, but we'll just kind of look at the numbers really quickly. So Connecticut as a whole, you look at how the entire country performed. We just talked about it. Everything was down, 17, 18% new listings, and our sales were down 17, 18%. And you had, price values did go up a little bit, right? So we're looking at these results for April 2020 of Connecticut, right? And there's a pretty big dip. I mean, the new listings were down 56%. This is all compared to last year. Now, nobody wants to see these numbers. Given the circumstances, it's kind of expected. I was hoping they wouldn't have been this much of a dip, But you know, here we are, and you know, we're thankfully right now, you know, I get notified every time we have a new listing in Groton, Stonington, North Stonington, or Ledyard. It's predominantly my market. So, you know, based on that activity, I've definitely noticed a pretty big uptick in new listings the past couple of weeks. So that shows me that these numbers are hopefully going to be the worst of it. I think May's numbers will come back stronger than this. And this report, usually the data comes back within a week after the month. So today's June 3rd. We should see some results from this in a couple of days, and then I'll get those numbers out to you, and you know, see what that shows. But you know, kind of the same thing. We'll look at that, and then we'll kind of zoom in a little bit closer. New London County, right? Almost exactly the same, right? So this is New London County, April 2020. Number of sales down 6.07%. New listings down almost 60%, and days on market were also down. I do think we're kind of over this hump right now. There's a lot more confidence in the market. People are starting to get out there. They're showing houses. People are walking into houses, and really, you know, I think I'm excited to see what these May numbers bring. Now, just one more quick comment I'll add really quickly to this video is, you know, these days on market. I remember I touched briefly on how I was expecting these, you know, the days on market to kind of go up a little bit with this uncertainty. Now, what I've seen recently, and this is kind of specifically the Mystic market, is, you know, the last listing I put out, it was literally on the market for like 2 days, and it was, you know, multiple offers, lots of showings, and I've kind of seen that throughout the other showings I've been doing. There's been a lot of activity. You know, I'm almost there with my client, like the first day this thing's available. There's people before us, there's people after us, and you know, homeowners are saying, yeah, we're taking all offers like in a couple of days. So, you know, these things, they're really not, and this is specifically that 3 to 4 bedroom, 2 bathroom, you know, really nice house in a nice area. It's a desirable house for a lot of people. And right now, given the fact that you have that and then just such low inventory, these houses are going pretty quick. So I think that definitely, you know, factors into this drop in the days on market. So yeah, that really kind of wraps up this video. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I appreciate it if you've made it this far. I know this is kind of a long video, but guys, one of my goals is to share my knowledge with as much people as I can. So if you can like this, comment, subscribe, or, you know, pass this along, that would be awesome. I appreciate you guys watching this, and I will see you next time. All right, thanks.